Good evening. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the shark-infested waters of international trade, or, as it's more commonly known these days, the global economy's unending existential crisis fun hour. You see, global trade used to be a somewhat predictable beast. Sure, it had its quirks, its little disagreements, its occasional flare-ups like a spicy vindaloo, but now it's less like a predictable curry and more like a game of Russian roulette played with exploding pineapples. The sheer unpredictability is enough to make even the most seasoned economist reach for the good stuff, and by good stuff, I mean a very, very large bottle of antacids, possibly followed by a stiff drink, or 7. It's a roller coaster designed by a sadist with a grudge against stability. The current state of affairs is, to put it mildly, a hot mess. We've got tariffs flying around like angry, misdirected pigeons, trade deals collapsing faster than a souffle in an earthquake, and geopolitical tensions adding more fuel to a fire that's already threatening to consume your retirement savings. Remember when the biggest trade drama was whether your avocado toast was ethically sourced? Simpler times, my friends, simpler times. Now we're staring down the barrel of economic forecasts that look less like projections and more like ransom notes. And who's orchestrating this symphony of chaos? Well, let's just say some world leaders seem to be playing 4D chess, while others are apparently just eating the chess pieces. The main culprit, or at least the one currently holding the megaphone and wearing the loudest "I love tariffs" t-shirt, seems to be the good old U.S. of A. Their recent trade policies have sent ripples, nay, tsunamis, across the globe. It's like that one friend who decides to help with your meticulously built Lego castle by improving it with a sledgehammer. Thanks, pal. So, buckle up, buttercups, because we're about to take a deep, unsettling dive into the murky, often absurd world of tariffs, trade deals, and the $95 billion love letter Europe is currently penning to Washington. So, how are our friends across the pond in Europe reacting to America's bold new strategy of, shall we say, aggressive economic diplomacy? Well, they're not exactly sending flowers and chocolates. The European Union is preparing a $95 billion passive-aggressive mixtape of retaliatory tariffs. That's right, 95 billion euros, roughly 107.6 billion US dollars. Enough money to buy a lot of fancy cheese to throw at the American embassy. This isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's a carefully aimed cannonball. The European Commission has proposed these countermeasures on US imports if tariff negotiations go south. These aren't just random tariffs, they're targeted. Think US agriculture, soybean farmers, you're in the crosshairs. Think technology, Apple might need to start selling iApologies. And of course the automotive sector, making it harder to buy a pickup truck. It's a precision strike aimed right at America's economic vulnerabilities. The motivation here isn't just petty revenge. The EU is facing 25% US import tariffs on its steel, aluminum, and cars. The EU is essentially saying, look, we'd prefer a nice calm chat, but if you insist on this tariff tantrum, we're ready to throw down. It's the international trade equivalent of don't make me come over there. Ah, Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving. Mostly headaches, economic uncertainty, and a pervasive sense of, oh dear, what have we done? Remember all those glorious promises of sunlit uplands and fantastic new trade deals? Well, about that. The UK-US trade deal? It's gone pear-shaped. Reports indicate it has collapsed, leaving the UK in an awkward trade position. The dream of global Britain has hit a large, American-sized pothole. The UK is now isolated, navigating choppy waters in a leaky dinghy. This collapse isn't just an embarrassment, it has real economic consequences. Now let's turn our gaze inward, to the land of the free and the home of the brave. Implemented tariffs. The intention behind these US tariffs might be dressed up in patriotic rhetoric, but the reality is less than stellar. Starting a trade war often means shooting yourself in the foot, or in this case, the entire American economy. The domestic fallout is hard to ignore. US port slowdowns are fantastic for a nation relying on imports. Consumer prices are on the rise. Surprise! Making imported goods more expensive makes everything more expensive. It's basic economics, the kind you learn in Econ 101. Some companies are considering exiting operations. And who's feeling the pinch? Pretty much everyone. The New York Times highlights impacts on major US companies. Think Apple navigating a minefield of import duties. Think General Motors with rising steel and aluminum costs, and Walmart previewing price hikes due to tariffs. This even sparked a rebuke from President Trump. It's a beautiful tapestry of economic self-harm. International indigestion. The world reacts to America's trade diet. It's not just the EU and the UK feeling the burn from America's fiery trade policies. Oh no, this particular brand of economic heartburn is going global. The ongoing tariff uncertainty is casting a long, ominous shadow over Europe's economic growth, with the New York Times reporting on May 19, 2025, that the EU significantly revised down its 2025 growth projections. The European Commission now expects the 20 Eurozone countries to grow by a rather underwhelming 0.9% in 2025, down from 1.3%. Germany, Europe's economic engine, is practically stagnating, its exports predicted to decline by 1.9% thanks to these tariffs. It's like watching a finely tuned orchestra suddenly being forced to play kazoos. The G7 nations, a group of supposedly powerful countries, have also expressed their concerns about the current global trade situation. That's diplomatic speak for what in the blazes are you doing, America? And can you please stop before we all end up eating cat food? Federal Reserve officials in the U.S. itself have issued warnings about potential price hikes resulting from tariffs. When your own central bank is waving red flags, it's generally a sign that things are not, as they say, hunky-dory. Japan, another major economic player, has downgraded its outlook on the global economy, specifically pointing a finger at the uncertainty stemming from U.S. trade policy. It's a global chorus of Houston, we have a problem. The European Commission's Valdis Dombrovskis summed it up neatly on May 19th. Heightened global uncertainty and trade tensions are weighing on EU growth. You don't say Valdis. Straight talk, Iran throws a geopolitical wrench in the works. Just when you thought the global trade situation couldn't get any more complicated, any more fraught with peril, along comes Iran to sprinkle a little geopolitical instability on top of our already burning economic dumpster fire, because clearly what the world needed right now was another layer of anxiety about whether vital shipping lanes might suddenly become impassable. It's like you're already juggling chainsaws, and someone helpfully throws in a live badger. Thanks, Iran. Really appreciate you keeping things interesting for us. This is, of course, not to make light of very serious geopolitical tensions, but the timing is, shall we say, spectacularly unhelpful for global commerce. The issue revolves around threats attributed to Iran concerning key maritime choke points. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandeb. These aren't just fancy names on a map, they are critical arteries for global trade, especially for oil and gas. Think of them as the tiny straws through which a massive portion of the world's energy milkshake must pass. Any disruption, or even the credible threat of disruption, can send shockwaves through energy markets and by extension, the entire global economy. It adds a whole new dimension of risk to supply chains that are already stretched thinner than a supermodel's patience. This isn't just a hypothetical concern. The New York Times reported on May 19, 2025, that these threats are actively exacerbating global trade chaos. When shippers have to start rerouting vessels, or when insurance premiums for traversing these waters go through the roof, guess who ultimately pays the price? That's right, it's you, the consumer, wondering why your gas bill suddenly looks like a phone number. It's another unwelcome ingredient in the already toxic stew of inflation and economic uncertainty. The Art of the Steal, Your Own Economy Edition, a U.S. trade policy autopsy. Alright, let's perform a little autopsy on current U.S. trade policy. Or perhaps, given that the patient is still technically alive, albeit wheezing and looking a bit green, let's call it a critical condition assessment. The guiding philosophy seems to have been America First, which is a catchy slogan, sure, but in practice it's often translated to America Alone, and also slightly poorer. The core idea of using tariffs as a blunt instrument to reshape global trade and bring jobs flooding back has, to put it charitably, encountered a few snags. It's like trying to perform brain surgery with a claw hammer. The intent might be there, but the results are messy and probably counterproductive. The primary tool in this bold new approach has been tariffs, tariffs, and more tariffs. Imposed with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for free pizza day in the office. The problem is, tariffs are not a magic wand. They are essentially a tax. And who pays that tax? Well, despite the rhetoric that foreign countries will foot the bill, it's overwhelmingly American businesses and consumers who end up paying more. As former U.S. Export-Import Bank Chair Fred Hochberg warned, these tariffs will ultimately be detrimental to U.S. consumers in the long run. It's not foreign governments writing checks to the U.S. Treasury. It's you, paying more for that new washing machine or those imported sneakers. The strategy also seems to have underestimated the willingness and ability of other countries to retaliate. Surprise! Other nations also have domestic industries and national pride. Untangling the tariff mess? A desperate plea for economic sanity. So we've waded through the murky swamp of tariffs, trade wars, and geopolitical jitters. The question now is, how do we get out of this mess without everyone's economic canoe capsizing? It's clear that the current approach of tariff everything and see what sticks isn't exactly yielding a bumper crop of global prosperity. In fact, it's doing quite the opposite. The first step, and this might sound radical, is to perhaps acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, a more nuanced strategy is required. One that involves less chest thumping and more, actual negotiation and cooperation. The New York Times, in its infinite wisdom, and based on, facts and expert opinions, has suggested a growing need for the U.S. to reconsider its current trade policies. This reconsideration should ideally involve rebuilding international alliances. Remember those? Alliances, those things where countries work together for mutual benefit instead of constantly trying to give each other economic wedgies. It turns out that having friends on the international stage can be quite useful, especially when tackling complex global challenges. Alienating your closest allies in pursuit of unilateral gains is often a recipe for, well, exactly what we're seeing now. Employing smarter negotiation tactics is also paramount. This doesn't mean caving on every issue, but it does mean understanding leverage, seeking common ground, and not treating every trade discussion like a zero-sum game where one side must be utterly vanquished. The EU, for instance, has presented a new trade proposal that includes phased tariff cuts and cooperation in key sectors like energy and AI. That sounds like a basis for discussion, doesn't it? A chance to de-escalate, as the European Commission itself noted, could lead to stronger economic growth. Imagine that cooperation leading to prosperity. What a novel concept.